Oil prices have crossed $100 per barrel again. Whenever that number appears in headlines, it immediately raises the same question across the United States. What will happen to gas prices? But before looking at the history of oil shocks or geopolitical events, it helps to understand something fundamental. Gasoline prices don't come directly from the oil market overnight. There is a long process between crude oil coming out of the ground and gasoline reaching a gas pump. And that process explains why prices sometimes move quickly and sometimes slowly. Crude oil is the raw material used to produce gasoline. It is pumped out of the ground in places like Texas, North Dakota, the Middle East, Canada, and many other parts of the world. Once extracted, that crude oil must be transported to refineries. Refineries are massive industrial facilities where crude oil is heated, separated, and processed into different petroleum products: gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, heating oil, chemical feedstocks. One barrel of crude oil contains 42 gallons, but those 42 gallons do not turn entirely into gasoline. A refinery splits that barrel into multiple products depending on demand and refinery configuration. After gasoline is produced, it still isn't ready for drivers. The fuel must be blended with additives and then transported through pipelines, ships, trains, or trucks to distribution terminals across the country. From there, tanker trucks deliver it to individual gas stations. Each step adds cost. Extraction, transportation, refining, distribution, retail sales. All of these components contribute to the price drivers see on the sign outside a gas station. Crude oil is usually the largest part of the cost, but it is not the only factor. Refining capacity plays a major role. If refineries shut down due to maintenance or storms, gasoline supply can tighten even if oil prices stay stable. Seasonal demand also affects prices. During summer months, Americans drive more. Refineries switch to a special summer gasoline blend designed to reduce emissions. That blend is more expensive to produce. As a result, gasoline prices often rise in the spring and early summer, even if crude oil prices remain steady. Taxes also play a role. Federal gasoline taxes add 18.4 cents per gallon. State taxes vary widely. Some states add only a few cents. Others add more than 50 cents per gallon. Local regulations and environmental standards can also affect prices. States like California often have higher gasoline costs because of specialized fuel requirements and distribution constraints. Retail competition affects prices as well. Gas stations operate on relatively small profit margins. In many cases, they make only a few cents per gallon. Convenience store sales inside the station often generate more profit than fuel itself. All of these pieces combine to determine the price of gasoline. So when oil crosses $100 per barrel, it creates pressure in the system. But the price drivers see at the pump reflects a chain reaction across an entire industry. Now that the system is clear, the next question becomes obvious. Why does oil sometimes jump so dramatically in price? To answer that, we have to look at history, because oil prices have surged before, and every spike tells a story about the world at that moment. The first major modern oil crisis happened in 1973. At the time, the United States relied heavily on oil imports from the Middle East. When the Yom Kippur War broke out between Israel and several Arab nations, members of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries imposed an oil embargo against the United States and other Western nations. The impact was immediate. Oil supplies dropped, prices surged. Gasoline shortages spread across the country. Americans waited in long lines at gas stations. Some stations closed entirely because they ran out of fuel. The crisis changed American energy policy dramatically. Speed limits were reduced. Fuel economy standards were introduced for automobiles. The United States began investing more heavily in domestic oil production and energy security. But the story did not end there. Another major oil shock arrived just a few years later. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution disrupted oil production in one of the world's major exporting countries. Markets reacted quickly. Oil prices rose again. Gasoline prices surged. Inflation increased across the global economy. For many Americans, the late 1970s became associated with high energy costs and economic instability. Oil markets stabilized somewhat in the 1980s and 1990s. New oil fields were developed. Technology improved production efficiency, supply increased, but the global energy system remained vulnerable to geopolitical events. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. The invasion threatened a large portion of global oil production. Markets reacted immediately. Oil prices spiked again. Although the surge was shorter than the crises of the 1970s, it reminded policymakers how fragile energy supply could be. The next major spike arrived in 2008. By that time, global demand for oil had grown rapidly. China's industrial expansion required enormous amounts of energy. Emerging economies were buying more cars and using more fuel. Supply struggled to keep up with demand. Oil prices surged to nearly $147 per barrel. Gasoline prices in the United States rose above $4 per gallon for the first time. The spike became one of the defining economic stories of the decade. Then something unexpected happened. The global financial crisis triggered a sharp economic slowdown. Demand for oil collapsed. Prices fell rapidly, but the story continued. In the following decade, technological breakthroughs changed the energy landscape again. Hydraulic fracturing, commonly called fracking, allowed American producers to unlock large oil reserves from shale formations. U.S. oil production surged. The United States became one of the largest oil producers in the world. For a time, increased supply helped stabilize global prices, but energy markets remain interconnected. Events anywhere can still influence prices everywhere. Conflicts, sanctions, production cuts, economic recoveries, shipping disruptions, all of these factors influence supply and demand, which brings us back to the present moment. Oil has crossed $100 per barrel again. That number signals tension in the global energy market. It means supply may be tightening, demand may be rising, or geopolitical risk may be increasing. For Americans watching gas prices, the question is not just whether prices will rise, it is how long oil stays elevated. Short spikes sometimes fade quickly. Longer spikes tend to push gasoline prices higher across the country. Energy markets have always moved in cycles: spikes, corrections, stability, then another surge. For drivers, the impact becomes visible at gas station signs. For the broader economy, it affects transportation costs, shipping prices, and inflation. Oil prices may start in distant oil fields or global trading floors, but eventually they appear in everyday life. In the price of a commute, the cost of a road trip, or the number displayed at the pump. And that is why every time oil crosses $100, people pay attention. Because behind that number is a global system that connects geopolitics, industry, and the daily lives of millions of drivers.